The city shelter sat on the far end of a cracked asphalt road, a place where hope rarely entered and almost never left. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead inside the lobby, flickering against the peeling blue paint like they were trying their best not to give up, just like many of the animals within. It was a cold Tuesday morning when volunteers wheeled in the emaciated dog, and even the workers, used to heartbreak, paused at the sight of him. His fur was patchy, mottled with scars and dirt, his ribs pressed against his skin like they were trying to escape. His legs trembled with each step, as though the act of standing required more strength than he had. But it was his eyes that stopped people in their tracks. They weren't wild or dangerous. They were tired, so painfully tired, deep brown circles that seemed to say, "If you end it, I understand." He didn't snarl, didn't growl. He simply stood there, swaying faintly, as though waiting for permission to collapse. One volunteer whispered, "Where did he come from?" Another shook her head, seized from a backyard breeder. They said he'd been starved, isolated, probably beaten. Poor thing doesn't have a chance. A staff member crossed his arms. Dogs like him don't get adopted. They're unpredictable, broken. Not broken, someone else muttered under their breath, just hurt. But the shelter director, used to these decisions, hardened by them, looked at the intake form and set it down with a sigh heavy enough to fill the room. "Put him in Kennel 4, he said quietly. "He needs to be evaluated, but we all know how this ends." They guided the trembling dog through the narrow hallway lined with metal kennels. Several dogs barked as he passed, but he never reacted, not even a flinch. When they finally placed him inside, he lay down immediately, curling into himself the way a dog does when it expects pain. Minutes drifted by, the shelter returned to its routine. Papers shuffled, doors opened, conversations rose and fell, and then soft footsteps echoed down the hall. A man holding the hand of a little girl. Emma, 8 years old, hair in a messy ponytail, eyes bright with curiosity and innocence in a place built from sorrow. She walked slowly, reading each dog's name tag, pressing her face close to every kennel window. Her father trailed behind her with that gentle patience parents develop after hearing the same request for weeks. "Daddy, can we visit the shelter, just to look, please?" She stopped at Kennel 4. At first she didn't speak. She simply stared at the frail dog lying motionless on the concrete floor. Something softened in her expression. She lowered to her knees, her face level with the metal bars. "Hi," she whispered through the glass. The dog didn't move. She looked up at her father. "Daddy, look at him." He frowned sympathetically. "Sweetheart, that dog looks very sick." "He's scared," Emma murmured, her voice trembling in that quiet, instinctive way children sense sadness. "That's all." Her father knelt beside her. "Emma, they said this one isn't safe. Maybe we should keep looking." But she didn't move. She pressed her palm against the glass, not touching the bars, just close. A small act, a gentle gesture, a moment of empathy no one had offered this dog in a long time. And then it happened. The dog, who hadn't lifted his head for anyone all day, slowly raised it. His eyes blinked open wider, his ears twitched, and with visible effort, as though the motion cost him everything, he dragged himself just a few inches closer to her. One slow thump of his tail. So small it could have been mistaken for a muscle spasm. But Emma saw it. Her breath caught. "Daddy, he likes me." The shelter worker walking by froze mid-step. Because this dog had shown zero interest in any human since arriving. Yet here he was, lifting his bruised head for a child. Emma leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "It's okay," she said, "I see you." And at that exact moment, the dog's tail thumped again. Twice. Enough to change everything. Enough to make everyone watching realize this story wasn't going to end the way they expected. For a long moment, the hallway outside Kennel 4 felt frozen in time. A volunteer who had been carrying a clipboard stopped mid-stride. Another worker setting down a food bowl blinked twice, wondering if she'd missing the tiny wag of that scarred tail. Even Emma stayed perfectly still, afraid that any sudden movement might break whatever fragile thread had connected her to the wounded dog behind the bars. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, he might just be reacting because you moved." "No," Emma whispered, shaking her head softly. "He looked at me, really looked." The dog's eyes, those tired, dulled, almost defeated eyes, were fixed on her with a focus he hadn't shown anyone. His chest rose and fell in slow, shaky breaths. He took another inch forward, paws sliding against the concrete floor. His ribs quivered with the effort. Emma leaned closer until her forehead nearly touched the glass. "Hi, buddy." Another flick of his tail. The shelter director, who had walked in at the wrong or perhaps the perfectly right moment, frowned deeply. What's going on here? The volunteer beside him whispered, Sir, he's responding. The director crossed his arms. He hasn't responded to anyone, not the handlers, vets, volunteers, no one. But even he couldn't deny what he was seeing. The dog, labeled aggressive, unadoptable, and scheduled for euthanasia, was inching his battered body toward a child with the kind of fragile hope found only in the desperate. Emma slowly lifted her hand again, keeping it just shy of the metal bars, not touching, not risking, just offering. It's okay, she said again, her voice warming the cold concrete around them. The dog lifted his nose toward her fingers, his ears twitched. He sniffed the air, inhaling her scent, trembling as if trying to remember what gentleness felt like. Her father gently tugged her arm. Emma, maybe we should give him space, he's scared. Emma didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the dog, and the dog's eyes were locked on hers. She whispered, I think he's more scared of losing someone who's being kind to him. Those words struck the adults around her with a quiet, painful truth. The director tried to reassert authority. Look, this dog is unpredictable. He has a history, a dangerous one. We can't just... He didn't finish his sentence. Because at that exact moment the dog took another step forward, this one bigger, more intentional. He rose shakily to his feet, though his legs clearly didn't want to hold him. He pressed the side of his face against the bars nearest Emma. A soft, broken sound escaped him, a whine so thin and fragile it sounded like it had been trapped inside him for years. Emma's eyes filled instantly with tears. Daddy, he's crying. Her father's jaw tightened. He swallowed hard, his hand falling uselessly to his side. Baby, he's hurt, really hurt. The director tried again. This dog is marked for behavioral euthanasia for a reason. Emma finally turned her head toward him, tears streaking her cheeks but her voice steady. But he's not being bad, he's just scared. You'd be scared too if someone hurt you. The director had no immediate response. And then before anyone could blink, the dog did something that made the entire hallway gasp. He slowly, painfully lowered himself onto his belly, stretching his front paws forward across the concrete. Not aggressive, not fearful. A surrender gesture. A plea for trust. A sign of brokenness and hope. Volunteers exchanged stunned looks. The director took a step back. Emma pressed her tiny palm to the glass again, crying quietly. You're not a bad dog, she whispered. You're just hurt. The dog's eyes closed for a moment, like he was letting her words sink into the deepest place in him. Then he opened them again, lifting his head just enough to nudge the bars. Emma gasped softly. He wants to come out, she said. Her father looked at the director, uncertain. The director glanced toward the dog, then toward Emma, then toward the staff waiting for instruction. Finally, he exhaled. We can consider opening the kennel, he said reluctantly, but only under controlled safety rules, and only if he shows he can be handled. Emma wiped her tears with her sleeve. Okay, she whispered. The director nodded to the handler. The handler reached for the kennel latch, and the dog abruptly backed away into the shadows, shaking violently, as if something inside him had suddenly remembered a reason to fear what was coming next. The air inside the shelter felt heavier now, like the concrete walls themselves were holding their breath. The dog crouched low in the corner of his kennel, ribs shaking, muscles tense. His eyes darted toward every human movement, every whispered word, every shadow cast by the fluorescent lights above. Even the soft squeak of Emma's sneakers on the hallway floor made him flinch. Emma's tiny hands were pressed together, knuckles white, and she whispered, It's okay, I won't hurt you. Her father's hand hovered near hers, unsure whether to pull her away or let her try. He could feel the tension radiating from the dog like electricity, and a pang of fear and awe mixed in his chest. A volunteer approached cautiously, clipboard in hand. Sir, maybe we should just leave him. He's not ready for people. The shelter director shook his head. No, he's on the schedule for euthanasia tomorrow. If he doesn't pass this, he won't see another day. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it, the cold, unavoidable reality of a shelter that couldn't keep every animal alive. Emma didn't move, her eyes were locked on the dog, and she shook her head gently. No, he's not bad, he just needs someone to believe in him. The director exhaled sharply. You don't understand, this dog has bitten 3 adults this week. We're lucky he hasn't injured a volunteer badly. If he lunges, we could have serious injuries. Emma's father tugged at her sleeve. Honey, come on, maybe we should. But Emma refused to budge. "Daddy, look at his eyes. He's scared, not mean. You can see it." The dog shifted slightly, trembling, but his gaze never left hers. There was a moment of fragile connection that no one could deny, a silent understanding, a bridge built of fear and hope. The director sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fine, let's see what he does, but you have one chance to handle him safely." A handler stepped forward with a leash and gloves, moving slowly and deliberately toward the cage. The dog recoiled at the motion, teeth bared for the first time, but not in aggression. It was fear, pure, raw fear. Emma froze, her hand hovered inches from the bars, a silent plea not to scare him further. "It's okay, you're safe," she whispered. The dog's ears flicked back and he lowered his head, but then, almost imperceptibly, he inched closer again, guided by that tiny thread of trust she offered. The handler extended a gloved hand. The dog's eyes widened and his body tensed like a coiled spring ready to snap. The staff held their breath. Emma's father swallowed hard, heart pounding as he stepped closer, but carefully, not to alarm the frightened dog. The dog let out a broken whine, a sound that tore at every adult in the room. Emma flinched at the sound, tears prickling her eyes. "See, Daddy, he's just scared." The director muttered under his breath, "Dogs like this don't get better, they don't change, we've seen it countless times." But the dog, trembling and quivering, took a tiny, deliberate step toward the handler, then another. Then he froze, waiting, calculating. His eyes flicked toward Emma, as if asking permission to trust someone. Emma leaned against the cage. "You can do it, I know you can." For a heartbeat, the world outside seemed to disappear, the fluorescent lights, the scent of disinfectant, the whispered doubts. Only the dog and the little girl existed, connected by something deeper than fear, deeper than logic. The handler inched closer, holding the leash loosely. The dog shivered violently and recoiled, but not away from Emma. Away from the adult guiding him, yes, but toward her. He seemed drawn, as if sensing that she was his only ally in a room full of strangers. Emma's father's heart raced. He's listening to her," he whispered, disbelief mixing with hope. And then, just as the handler tried to gently nudge him forward, the dog let out a terrified, guttural bark and backed into the corner, shaking so hard the entire kennel seemed to rattle. The room went silent, everyone froze, unsure what would happen next. Emma pressed her face to the glass, tears streaming, whispering desperately, "It's okay, you don't have to be afraid of me." But the dog's next move would determine everything, his fate, her heartbreak, and the possibility that this small, frightened creature might finally get a second chance. And in that moment, no one knew if he would trust again, or if tomorrow would be his last day alive. The shelter hallway seemed to hold its breath. Volunteers froze mid-step, clipboard hands trembling. Even the fluorescent lights overhead flickered as if unsure whether to illuminate this fragile moment or leave it in shadows. The dog remained in the corner, body pressed low, eyes wide and panicked. His ribs heaved with every trembling breath. Each muscle in his body was taut, ready to bolt, ready to bite if necessary, yet tethered by something no one in the room could name. Emma pressed her tiny palms to the glass again, whispering softly, "It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." Her voice wavered, catching in her throat with the weight of hope and fear combined. She leaned closer, as if the warmth of her words alone could reach through the steel bars and calm the storm inside him. Her father knelt beside her, voice low and cautious. "Emma, you have to be careful. He's scared, yes, but he's also unpredictable." Emma shook her head, determined. "No, he's not unpredictable. He's just hurt, that's all. He needs someone to see him." The shelter director ran a hand over his face, eyes narrowing. "We can't risk it. This dog has a history. Bite reports, aggressive behavior, trauma from the breeder. We've seen dogs like this, they don't recover. At some point, you have to accept reality." Emma didn't flinch. Reality is that he's scared, not bad. He just needs someone to help him. The dog's head twitched, his ears flicked slightly. He slowly shifted his weight, inching forward, not toward the handlers, not toward the adults who whispered and fretted, but toward the sound of her voice. One of the volunteers whispered almost to herself, he's showing trust, that's huge." The director gave a short, dismissive laugh, though there was tension beneath it. "It's not trust, it's instinct. Sometimes fear makes dogs cling to the smallest source of comfort. That's not adoption material, that's survival." But the dog didn't move back, he didn't growl, he didn't bite. He lowered himself onto his belly, stretching his front paws forward in a slow, deliberate gesture, flattening himself as if surrendering, as if saying, "I won't fight. I'm letting you see me. I trust you." Emma's breath hitched. "See, he wants to be safe. He wants help." Her father's voice shook slightly. "It's incredible he's reacting to you, but he's still terrified. We can't assume it'll last." The dog, sensing her unwavering presence, inched his face closer to the bars. His trembling slowed, just barely. For the first time in what felt like forever, his eyes weren't glazed with fear. They were soft, tentative, searching for safety. The director rubbed his eyes. If he gets out, if he reacts badly, it's on all of us. This is not a decision to take lightly. Emma didn't respond. She whispered, I see you, you're not alone. And then the dog did something that made the entire room freeze. Slowly, deliberately, he pressed his nose to the bars closest to her, letting out a soft, broken whine that sounded like the sound of someone who had been invisible for too long. A hush fell over the room. Volunteers exchanged astonished looks. Emma's father swallowed hard. The director's mouth opened, then closed again, speechless. The dog's gaze didn't leave hers. He lowered his head further, tail flicking once, a tentative signal of connection. He was reaching out in the only way he knew, vulnerable and fragile, hoping someone would notice, hoping someone would care. Emma's tiny voice broke the silence. It's okay, you're safe, I promise. Her father's heart pounded in his chest. Emma, if this works, it could save him. The director inhaled sharply, or it could fail catastrophically, but for now we watch. The tension in the room was so thick you could almost touch it. Everyone waited, barely breathing, as the dog, broken, battered, and all but written off, made a decision that no one had expected. And then, just as the handler reached forward to open the cage, the dog froze, eyes wide, ears pinned back, and suddenly backed away again, trembling violently, as if something inside him remembered every bit of pain he had endured. No one knew at that moment whether he would trust again, or whether tomorrow would come for him at all. The fate of this dog and the little girl who had touched his soul hung by a single fragile thread. The evaluation room was stark and cold, all sterile white walls and harsh fluorescent lighting. A single metal table stood in the center, a chair at the side, and the air smelled faintly of disinfectant mixed with the lingering tension of every test the room had seen before. The dog's paws dragged across the floor as he stepped in, trembling violently with each cautious movement. His body was low, ears pinned back, eyes darting at every corner, every shadow. This room was not meant to comfort him. It was designed to measure him, to judge whether he had any chance of survival beyond tomorrow morning. Emma stood behind the glass, tiny hands pressed flat against it. Her small face reflected worry and determination. It's okay, you can do this, she whispered, voice cracking under the weight of hope. The dog's ears twitched, almost imperceptibly, as though he recognized her voice, a lifeline in a world that had been nothing but harsh and cruel. The handler, a calm woman named Sarah, approached slowly, leash in hand. She knelt a few feet away, allowing the dog to see her but not cornering him. Easy, buddy, it's okay, she said softly. But the dog recoiled, retreating into the corner with a shiver that ran the length of his body. He pressed his head against the wall, shaking violently, as if expecting the worst at any moment. Emma gasped, pressing her forehead against the glass. Daddy, he's terrified. He thinks they're going to hurt him. Her father's lips pressed into a thin line, heart pounding. I know, sweetheart, but we can't fail him now. The director stood nearby, clipboard in hand, watching every motion with professional detachment that barely masked his unease. This is it, he muttered. If he can't pass this, it's over. He's not adoptable. He's dangerous. We euthanize. The handler extended a gloved hand toward the dog. He flinched, teeth bared, but not aggressively. It was fear, pure, raw, primal fear. Every muscle was coiled, ready to flee or lash out. Emma's eyes filled with tears. It's okay, I'm right here, you're safe. She pressed her tiny hand to the glass as if sending him courage through the barrier. The dog lifted his head slightly, ears flicking toward her voice. Slowly, painfully, he inched forward, one trembling paw, then another, toward the direction of the handler. Then he froze, staring up at the extended glove. A low whine escaped him, cracked and broken. The room held its breath. Every volunteer, every staff member, even Emma's father, was motionless, waiting for what could be the pivotal moment of the dog's life. Minutes stretched like hours. The dog pressed forward again, cautiously sniffing the hand, then retreating, each motion a battle between fear and the faintest glimmer of trust. Emma whispered, "You can do it, I believe in you." Her voice wavered but carried strength. Finally, after what felt like eternity, the dog's trembling slowed. He lowered his front half to the floor in a gesture of surrender. Then, inch by inch, he crept toward the handler, guided not by compulsion but by trust, one paw, then another. His nose brushed the gloved hand, soft and tentative, and he shivered, but didn't retreat. The handler exhaled softly, her hand frozen in place, letting the dog decide the pace. Good boy, that's it." Emma's father whispered, disbelief mixing with hope. He's trying, he's listening to her." The dog's gaze flicked toward Emma once more, then back at the handler. One step, two steps, then suddenly the dog froze, muscles tensing violently. A guttural, terrified growl ripped through him, echoing in the cold room. Everyone froze, the director's heart raced, the volunteers held their breath. Emma pressed both hands to the glass, whispering, "It's okay, you're safe, I promise." But the growl didn't stop. It wasn't aggression, it was the raw echo of years of pain and fear. The room waited, suspended in the silence that followed, wondering if this test would end in tragedy, or if this trembling, battered dog could finally prove he deserved another chance at life. And in that moment, the next choice rested solely on him. The growl echoed through the evaluation room, raw and primal, bouncing off the sterile walls. It wasn't anger, it was fear, anguish, and every ounce of trauma this dog had endured compacted into a single, trembling sound. The handler froze, hands hovering above the leash, unsure how to coax him forward. Volunteers exchanged anxious glances, and the director's clipboard nearly slipped from his hands. Every person in the room felt the tension tighten like a noose. One wrong move could end everything in chaos. But Emma didn't flinch. She pressed her face closer to the glass, tears streaking her cheeks, voice trembling yet steady. "It's okay, buddy, I'm right here. You don't have to be afraid of me." Her father's heart pounded. "Emma, honey, get back," he urged softly, though he stopped short of pulling her away. He couldn't, not yet. He saw something in her expression, something he'd never seen before, unshakable faith in the smallest, most vulnerable creature in the room. The dog's growl softened for a fraction of a second, his trembling lessened, but fear still coursed through every fiber of his body. The handler stepped closer, cautiously, attempting to extend her hand again, but the dog recoiled violently, ears flat, teeth bared. Emma's voice cracked, but she leaned closer still. "Buddy, you're not alone, I promise. Nobody's going to hurt you." Something extraordinary happened then. The dog lifted his head, eyes scanning the room, and when his gaze landed on Emma, he hesitated. Slowly, he lowered himself onto the floor, belly pressed lightly to the cold ground. His tail twitched once, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, but it was enough. Emma's breath caught. "See, Daddy, he knows I'm not going to hurt him. He knows I'm safe." Her father swallowed hard, eyes wide. I think he's choosing you, he's trusting you." The handler whispered softly, encouraging him to move. "It's okay, buddy, you can do this." But the dog didn't respond to her, not yet. Every muscle was coiled, his body still trembling, but he made a decision in that heartbeat. He would trust the little girl who had looked at him and seen more than his scars, more than his fear. Emma took a deep breath, and before anyone could stop her, she pushed open the small door to the evaluation room and stepped inside. "It's okay, buddy, I won't let anyone hurt you," she said softly, crouching down to his level. The dog froze, eyes wide, quivering violently. The handler froze, volunteers gasped, the director's jaw tightened. But Emma didn't flinch. She extended her small hand toward his nose, not touching him, just offering the gesture of safety and trust. Slowly, the dog inched forward, head dipping closer to her hand, body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Then, with a hesitant whine, he pressed his nose against her palm. Tears ran freely down Emma's face. "See, you're safe, I've got you now." Her father exhaled, nearly collapsing with relief. "Oh God, he's letting her." The dog's tail thumped once, twice, then a third time, a small, fragile heartbeat of hope. He lowered his head into Emma's lap, trembling but not resisting. The room was silent except for the soft whimpers, the shuffle of the handler's feet, and Emma's gentle whispers of reassurance. Then something unexpected happened. The dog's gaze shifted briefly toward the handler, who had extended a test object as part of the evaluation. The dog flinched, hesitant, but didn't pull back from Emma. Slowly, with Emma's hand steadying him, he stepped forward just enough to touch the object with his nose. The handler's eyes widened. He's engaging with the test. The director whispered, disbelief and hope mingling in his voice. I didn't think he could, not today." Emma hugged him gently. "You're a good boy, buddy. You can do this. I believe in you." But just as relief seemed to wash over the room, the dog stiffened again, ears flicking, eyes darting toward something behind the glass, as if sensing a presence no one had noticed. Everyone froze, breath catching. Emma held him tighter, whispering, "It's okay, I've got you." And in that moment everyone waited, unsure whether the breakthrough they had hoped for would survive the next few seconds, or shatter entirely. The evaluation room seemed suspended in time. The dog, still trembling in Emma's lap, lifted his head and sniffed the air. His ears flicked toward the glass where a tall, uniformed figure had just appeared. The moment their eyes met, the dog stiffened, muscles taut, body trembling violently. Emma's heart skipped a beat, and even her father instinctively stepped closer to shield her. The officer pushed open the door to the viewing area, his face stern, eyes scanning the room. "That's the dog we seized last week," he said quietly, voice low but carrying through the room. "The one from the breeder's property." A hush fell over the shelter staff. Volunteers whispered to each other, and the director's pen paused mid-note on the clipboard. "Seized. Explain," the director asked, tension creeping into his voice. The officer took a slow breath. He wasn't just abused, he was used for illegal dog fights. A shiver ran through the room. Emma's father clenched his jaw. Volunteers exchanged horrified glances. Emma herself froze, staring at the dog in her lap. His eyes, wide and trembling, seemed to reflect the weight of every word spoken about him. "He didn't fight back when we raided the property," the officer continued. "He was chained, protecting a group of puppies from the others. He saved them from being killed." Emma gasped softly. He saved them." The officer nodded, nearly died doing it. He took every beating, every fear to shield those little ones. If not for him, they wouldn't have survived. The director ran a hand over his face. "So, all these bites, all this aggression, it was fear, trauma, not malice." "Yes," the officer said firmly. "Fear, pain, survival instincts after years of abuse. But this dog, he's special. He's brave in ways most people will never understand." Emma hugged him tighter. "See, I told you, buddy, you're brave, you're a hero." The dog shivered in her arms but relaxed slightly, as though acknowledging her words. Volunteers wiped their eyes. Even the director's stern facade cracked. The officer stepped closer, kneeling slightly to meet the dog's gaze. "He's lucky someone like you came along, kid," he said softly to Emma. "Someone who can see him, not just the damage he's endured." Emma whispered, "I didn't do it alone. He trusted me." The handler looked at the dog, amazed. He's never responded like this before, not to any human, but to her. He's choosing her. The dog's tail thumped once, then twice, small movements that belied the magnitude of trust he was offering. Emma's father exhaled, tears threatening to spill. "I can't believe it. After everything he's been through, he's letting her guide him." The director nodded slowly, voice heavy. "If he passes the test now, there's no reason he can't be adopted. He deserves a second chance." The officer looked at Emma and then back at the trembling dog in her lap. "You may have just saved his life," he said quietly, "and he may save yours in ways you don't even realize yet." Emma stroked his fur gently. "I promise, I'll never let anyone hurt you again." The dog lifted his head, eyes locking on hers, breathing slowing, body relaxing incrementally. He stepped cautiously toward the test object that the handler held out, sniffed it, and pressed his paw softly against it, an act of trust that no one had expected. The handler's eyes widened, voice trembling. He's engaging with the test. He's passing." Everyone exhaled collectively, but before the moment fully sank in, the dog's ears twitched, his head snapped toward a shadowed corner of the room behind the glass. His body stiffened once more, trembling violently. No one knew what he saw or what memory had been triggered, but the air grew thick again with tension. Emma held him tighter, whispering reassurances. And in that charged, fragile moment, the entire room waited, hearts pounding, for the next move that would determine whether hope could finally triumph over fear, or if the past would pull him back into darkness. The room was tense, every eye fixed on the trembling dog in Emma's lap. He had survived fear, abuse, neglect, and the looming threat of euthanasia, but the final test still loomed before him. The handler extended the test object slowly, careful not to spook him. The dog froze, muscles taut, every nerve coiled with uncertainty. His eyes flicked toward Emma, then back at the object, as if asking silently, "Do I dare trust again?" Emma whispered softly, "It's okay, I'm right here. You can do this, I believe in you." Her small hand rested gently on his back, a steadying presence amidst the storm of his fear. The dog lifted his head, tail flicking once. He lowered himself into a crouch, belly brushing the floor, and inched forward. Inch by inch, paw by paw, he approached the object, pausing to sniff, to hesitate, to breathe. And then, miraculously, he touched it with his nose. A shiver ran through him, but he stayed. The handler's breath hitched. He's doing it," she said, voice breaking. Volunteers leaned forward, tears streaming, whispers of astonishment rippling through the room. Emma's father exhaled heavily, clutching her hand. "I can't believe it, he's actually doing it." The director's clipboard dropped unnoticed to the floor. He ran a hand over his face, disbelief etched in every line. He's passed. He's actually passed. But Emma didn't pull back. She hugged the dog gently, pressing her cheek to his fur. "You're a good boy, you did it. I knew you could." The dog shivered, then pressed himself closer, as though he had finally found the safety he had yearned for his whole life. His tail thumped softly once, twice, a fragile heartbeat of hope, and his eyes softened, no longer wild with terror but glimmering with trust and relief. The officer who had arrived earlier stepped forward, his voice quiet and steady. "You may not realize it, kid, but you've just saved this dog's life. He would have been gone tomorrow, and now he has a future, because of you." Emma hugged him tighter. "We saved each other," she whispered. Volunteers and staff watched in awe as the broken dog, once written off, labeled unadoptable, too damaged to survive, stood fully, trembling but upright. He stepped toward the handler, then glanced back at Emma, as if saying, "I choose you." The director cleared his throat, voice wavering. "If anyone ever doubted the power of compassion, witness this. This dog has faced a lifetime of fear, and a single little girl, a single act of trust has given him a chance to live." Emma's father knelt beside her. "I knew you had a big heart, but this is incredible." The officer knelt as well, looking down at the dog. "He's not just lucky, he's a hero. He protected puppies, survived abuse, and now he's survived again. And maybe the most important thing, he's learned that not all humans hurt." The dog leaned into Emma, resting his head against her chest. She stroked his fur gently, whispering, "You're safe now, forever." The handler's eyes glistened with tears. "This rarely happens," she murmured. "This kind of breakthrough, it's almost impossible." The room fell into a reverent silence, punctuated only by soft sobs and the quiet thump of the dog's tail. Emma's tiny arms wrapped around him, holding him with the fierce certainty of someone who had chosen love over fear. The director finally spoke, voice choked. "He's yours to adopt, Emma. You've earned this. He passed, and tomorrow will be another day, not the end." Emma's eyes widened. "Really, he's mine." The dog lifted his head, gaze meeting hers, and wagged his tail just slightly, a small, tentative victory. Emma smiled through tears, whispering, "I promise I'll never let anyone hurt you again." The officer, volunteers, staff, and her father watched as the little girl and the dog, both once broken in their own ways, sat together in a quiet, sacred bond. For the first time, hope had won, trust had conquered fear, and a life that was meant to end had just begun. Everyone in that room cried, not for the past, but for the miracle of a second chance and for the love that had saved a broken soul.